This is the On the Pony Express podcast, part of the On3 network. Check out all the SMU coverage you need at ontheponyexpress.com. Now, here's your host, Billy Embody. Billy Embody. 1, 2, 3, let me go.
Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the After Stangs Show. I am Billy Embody. With me is Dean Ralsky. This has been a minute since we've been at Shug's Bagels in Mockingbird Plaza after an SMU game, just with the schedule and all those things. But we're here, and what better way to send out SMU's regular season with a Shug's Bagel after we get done recording. But the appetizer, of course, was that 38-6 win over Cal for number 9 SMU to close out the regular season.
Yeah, it was just a complete controlled win from SMU. It wasn't the, a 5 out of 5 performance, 10 out of 10, whatever you want to say. But in a week and on a day where a lot of teams thought maybe they had a game in the bag and they didn't, SMU took care of business today and won at 38-6.
Yeah, we'll get to kind of a look around what is a wild day of college football, kind of in the quad box behind us. You can't see it. But Shugs does have TVs. Texas up big on Texas A&M. You have Oklahoma and LSU locked in a battle. They're not playoff teams, but you have a day that was so wild. And we'll talk about the ACC Championship as SMU will face Clemson in that ACC Championship next week in Charlotte. We'll both be there. But let's get to what happened in Ford Stadium. SMU does win 38-6. They raced out to a 21-0 lead. It never felt in doubt, but a game that, once again, SMU has things they can work on.
Absolutely. And I think someone said it on the board. It felt very similar to the Stanford game. And it was at the start. SMU went up 21-0 inside the first quarter against Stanford. This time it took just a few minutes into the second quarter to get to that mark. But then again, they didn't pull away. They didn't absolutely blow out Cal. I think on a day where SMU plays well, this could have been an absolute blowout where backups are in by the third quarter. But again, Brett Lashley's talked about it for both years, or the last 2 years, really, when SMU's had the success about winning games in November. And ultimately, it's not about how you win and what it looks like. It's about winning games, and SMU went undefeated in November this year.
And for SMU seniors that they honored, this was another unbeaten conference season in back-to-back years, back-to-back 11-win seasons. What they're putting together as a program right now is something that a lot of people around the country are certainly talking about. Brett Lashley talked about his, hope that this program does build up into a program that's talked about with the brand biases of the world. And they're off to a good start in his tenure, making 3 straight bowls and obviously winning the conference last year and now playing for another championship. But in this game, you saw a lot of the veterans show up and guys who have played a bunch of college football. You saw Jonathan McGill grab an interception. You saw Brashard Smith make a great touchdown grab, a national champion and Matthew Hibner make a touchdown grab. And you saw an offensive line that had to plug in Ben Sparks, who Brett Lashley talked about recruiting back in 19, and just a guy who's stuck around and gets to start on senior day. And it wasn't pretty, but stepped right in for Logan Parr and played really well.
Yeah, and it's been a nice balance for SMU between the guys that have been here through, coming from high school to also the transfer portal. Coach Lashley said in the press conference, both quarterbacks who both played really well today. We'll talk about Preston Stone and, the highlight he had at the end of the game, but they both came to SMU out of high school. And to go back to the piece about the national media attention, you've got ACC Network saying it's, the story of the season. Pat McAfee on College Game Day saying, he doesn't just like SMU this year, but with Brett Lashley into the future. And then, of course, I think everybody's seen the praise that Nick Saban has given SMU all year long. And so has Kirk Herbstreit, really, since last year, too. He's been big SMU fan the past couple of years. But, yeah, the seniors showed up, the veteran group that, you can't quantify how important it is to have that sort of leadership. When you go back to the game against Nevada, the way back in week 0, how far this team has come from, being a couple plays away from maybe dropping that opening game. But the resilience this team has, they've showed it all year long. And no better way to cap it off than with a 38-6 win.
I think the start for SMU, jumping out to a 21-0 lead, and we've seen it now the last couple weeks where SMU kind of moves it a little bit, but doesn't really do much.
Right.
And we kind of saw that early against Cal, and then they turned it on. You've got the Matthew Hibner touchdown pass. You've got Rashard Smith capping a drive with a touchdown run. And then you have the freshman, Derek McFall, who, for those of you who have listened to the podcast for a while now, or at least as long as SMU's had Derek McFall committed, we've been high on him. You know, Tyler, Texas, they just ran everything through him at Tyler, especially as a senior. That was a very young team, and he was the leader. He did everything, and he took his role, which was redshirting this year, and said, I'm going to keep working and perform well enough in practice where Rhett Lashley and the staff can be excited and give him opportunities like this against a Power 4 team on senior day, no less, to help maybe take a little bit of the load off Rashard Smith, who still ended up with 16 carries. But Derek McFall getting 2 on the day, gets a touchdown, just flashes some of that burst. And then he had the catch that went for 30 yards, showing that total package that really he could – I mean, next year he could really slide in and be viewed as not the next Rashard Smith, because we need to see that to believe it.
Right.
But what he can do and bring to the table.
And I don't even think in certain cases you'll have to wait till next year. Now that he's able to play the rest of the season, I think it gives Clemson something else to prepare for. It takes a little bit of the load off Rashard Smith. And so I think it's just, Coach Lashley said, it's added depth, and that's exactly what it is. And it comes at a big time when SMU is almost through the thick of the season, but they're playing in these extra games that they've earned, and it's going to come at a cost.
Defensively, SMU holds Cal on the day to 254 total yards. They got some chunk plays here and there. They had some explosives allowed. They had a lot of penalties on the day. SMU did 17, 137. And look, some of them you can talk about, okay, well, I don't know about that PI, or Ja'Kai Clark gets, guys kind of messing with him and he just kind of throws them and he flops. Penalty, procedure penalties, false starts, lining up offsides. Those are things that got to be corrected. But when you have that many, Rhett Lashley said it best, when you have that many, it doesn't matter if you disagree with a few of them. You had enough that it's a concern. But, SMU was able to really force Cal into changing quarterbacks. Chandler Rogers got the start for Fernando Mendoza, who had an illness that popped up, which, after their win against Stanford was a blow to them. But Chandler Rogers came in and SMU really controlled him and was pressuring him all day.
And I think that was the difference between, you saw the Miami and the SMU game go on at the same time. And it was funny, with exactly 12:57 to go in the second quarter in both games, both teams were up 21-0. And so you're like, okay, it looks like both teams are on their way to the ACC Championship. And then you realize that SMU has a legit strong defense. Well, I think you saw what the Miami defense struggled to do against Syracuse. And ultimately, that's why SMU is playing Clemson in a week.
I've been able to talk with a lot of players just in different situations, maybe that aren't just sitting there with the media. And a lot of them have talked about certain games this year. Like, I remember talking to Elijah Roberts about Louisville and how Louisville was for real. And that was a couple weeks after that. And, certain teams showing up and doing certain things really well that maybe don't necessarily show up on tape. And I'm not trying to say that SMU shouldn't stall out in the middle of the second quarter, and slow down offensively by any means. They still have to execute, but this was a tricky Cal team. They were only 17 points away from basically being 9-2, I think. Going into this
didn't
one.
Lose the game by more than one possession all year long.
Yeah,
until tonight.
Yeah, and so I think you've got to give SMU credit for coming out and completely handling this game start to finish. I think that's something to be said. And with all the distractions and all the things, this team just keeps on winning.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something to be said for that.
100%. And, a lot of people will want to talk about strength of schedule, but I really believe on a different year, this is a top 25, top 20 Cal team that's, 9-2 coming into this game. And record doesn't matter. SMU will know how good Cal is. And ultimately, that's most important. They understood that this was a good Cal team and took them seriously. And they took it to them. Again, they got off to the hot start. The defense just played well throughout. Yes, we've talked about the penalties already being a potential issue moving forward, but they took care of business again on a day where that wasn't easy to come by.
So we'll break down more of this game with Hayden. Dean and I are just kind of reacting on the fly here, but I do want to shout out the seniors, and I'm going to list them off just rapid fire. Try to keep it under a minute. But Brandon Crosley, Brashard Smith, Preston Stone, Jonathan McGill, Moochie Dixon, Elijah Roberts, Jafari Harvey, Mike Lockhart, Keyshawn Smith, Tank Booker, Jake Bailey, Roger Daniels, CJ Sanders, Kobe Wilson, Devon Celestine, Joey Bruiser, Ahmad Walker, Terrion Lee Jr., Isaac Pearson, Justin Osborne, Ja'Kai Clark, Max Yo, Caleb Johnson, Ben Sparks, Keaton Schultz, Jared Harrison Hunt, Davis Hawkins, Corey Roberson Jr., Matt Baer, and Gabriel Lozano. This group for me is one of the groups that, and I know a lot of them have transferred in or whatever, but Justin Osborne, Ben Sparks, Brandon Crosley, a lot of those guys and some other guys who haven't been here necessarily 5 years, but a lot of these guys have been, my reintroduction to living back in Dallas, like after COVID and moving back here. So I've been back since 2020 and gotten to spend a lot of time with these guys. I knew Brandon back in high school, and for them to go out the last 2 years really and play the way they have has been really special to watch. I've seen Brandon Crosley mature enough to be one of the best trash talkers on the team, but also be mature enough to redshirt, then return and start at outside corner all year. And he had one play he gave up, big plays. I think that was a 60-yarder, but then came back earlier in the game and had a big hit. And he's one of the emotional leaders. He gets guys fired up. Justin Osborne, I saw his dad on the field before the game and just exchanged some words with him. And this is a group that's done a lot for SMU. And I think to go out with a stress-free and you say what you want. When it got to 21-6, it was stress-free. There was nothing that, like Rhett said after the game, unless you started throwing interceptions and throwing the game away, this was going to be stress-free. And to send them out this way, and I thought the crowd was good too. Yeah, I think really nice day for SMU overall.
To touch on that too, I did think the crowd was pretty good. Rel Ashley said after, they've struggled to get crowds for these Thanksgiving games, and this was a pretty good one. They broke the single season attendance record at Ford Stadium this year, and Rel Ashley said this is just a start. He wants to see, the students or the fans stay till the end of the game and create a special environment, because it can be one of the toughest environments to play in college football. But going back to the secondary, Brandon Crossley, the cornerbacks in particular were one of the biggest question marks coming into the year. And it's safe to say they performed. You can't go 11-1 and have a bad position group. Yeah. And so that group has stepped up. Jalen Davis Robinson came in a year ago and has gotten better. And, he's had his moments. Everybody will have their moments. But overall, the secondary, the cornerbacks, each position has stepped up on their own. And that's how you go 11-1.
They will not flash with statistics. That group will not. But what they are able to do is they're able to play well enough when it matters. You give up a 60-yard reception, they're able to settle in. And I don't know if that was the drive that they forced to miss or if they ended up making a field goal. But defense has played lights out the last 2 weeks against inferior offenses in particular, which, Cal has talent. Like, don't get me wrong. They have some guys that can really go. But overall, they did exactly what the committee is looking for the last 2 weeks. And so let's get into that, and then we'll get into questions and wrap this up. But for SMU fans, you can now look at this team and say, all right, you're going to the ACC Championship, playing Clemson, who lost to South Carolina today, didn't do their part. Miami didn't do their part. No one in the ACC has done their part all year, except SMU. And you could say Syracuse, I guess, because 9-3, pretty good team. Louisville, whatever. But no one's played consistent football except SMU. And, maybe they are undefeated if things go differently at the beginning of the season. But they aren't. And at the same time, you've got to respect the fact that they have played so well in league play. They've rarely trailed. What is it? Maybe the cost of a Shug's bagel in minutes. They've trailed, maybe less. Right. That's really impressive and hard to do.
Well, and I remember after the BC game, Coach Lashley said that's what he expected all of these Power 4 games to be: 1 or 2 possession games down to the wire in the final. Games decided in the final few minutes. And SMU just hasn't played in many of those games this year. I think they'll play in one next week, and we'll get there. But again, Clemson, favorites against South Carolina. People were saying that was maybe the hottest team in the SEC. Well, they go in to Death Valley and they come out with a win. Clemson certainly had their opportunities to win that game, no doubt about it. Miami had their opportunities to really put that game away against Syracuse, potentially in the first half, when they were up 21-0. And On the contrary, all that to say, again, SMU is just chipping away and still maybe not even getting all the credit they deserve for what they've accomplished this season. But after a couple of disappointing losses across the ACC, SMU, yes, doing their part.
I think looking at it today, mind you, Michigan is bad offensively.
Yep.
And Michigan went out today in a rivalry game and beat Ohio State. And I think that's one of the biggest stories in college football this weekend, obviously, because now, yes, Ohio State is not going to be a team that SMU can jump in the top 4, I don't think. I think it's generally set, like Texas wins out, they're probably going to be the 2 seed. But what SMU's always kind of been in control of is 3 versus 4. And the last 2 weeks, they've set themselves up to be the 3 seed. Mm-hmm. And they set themselves up to play in the Peach Bowl if they win the ACC Championship. But what they really set themselves up to do, because they've kept winning and other teams have faltered, you look around at Alabama beat Auburn, which is fine. Great. They're still in it. Clemson is out. South Carolina barely beat Clemson. I don't think they did enough to jump an SMU team that maybe loses in the ACC Championship, even though Tennessee, not really, dominant by any means, good Vandy team. But you had Miami that lost. You had USC taking care of business. Now you have a little bit of question mark as far as those bottom however many teams. I mean, you've got Notre Dame taking care of business, Penn State. Ohio State will make it, obviously, even though, 2-loss Big Ten team. It's just now it gets interesting. But nevertheless, it just goes to show you've got a football team in SMU that has continuously done everything that's been asked of them. And I hope that if SMU loses in the ACC Championship, and it is respectable, then the committee rewards. But what they've said is that the championship game shouldn't really kill you.
Right. And based off what happened this week, I mean, SMU is going to be number 7 or 8 in the country. Even losing that game, okay, drop a spot or 2. It's hard for them to say that and then drop SMU 4 or 5 spots all the way out of the playoff, especially in a game. South Carolina, again, the big win. How far do they jump up? Well, the 2 teams in front of them, Alabama and Ole Miss, both have head-to-head wins over South Carolina. So that's a whole mess in itself between those 3-loss SEC teams. And again, the hope for SMU is that while the SEC has kind of made its way into the chaos category of the season, that they've done enough to separate themselves enough and create the gap to where they can have a slip up against a respectable team in what is likely to be a tough environment for SMU to play in, to where if they slip up, they still have enough breathing room to say, as Coach Lashley says, they have a nice body of work that is better than those behind them.
Yep, especially if you look at it like a basketball NCAA tournament committee, they didn't have star player X for the first 10 games of the season, or they missed him in these 5 critical matchups. SMU didn't have Kevin Jennings as a starter. Now, that's a coaching decision. It's a whole deal, whatever. But you look at what SMU is over the last 9 games, I mean, they're one of the best teams in the country. And whether or not strength of schedule matches that up, as Nick Saban says, he always talks about it on College Game Day, complementary football.
Mm-hmm. And I think what you've seen now, too, is the timing of your losses matter. SMU lost super early on in the season. I think if Notre Dame lost to NIU this week, that would be chaos. But because it was so early on in the season and they've played well, they're without a doubt in the playoff. And so SMU, again, the SEC has been in a bunch of tight games. You can say what you want about rivalry games always being close, and that's fair, and I understand that. But when a lot of teams around them were in competitive games, some that won, some that lost, the past few weeks, SMU has just been steady and hasn't made it difficult for the committee to rank them.
Yeah, exactly. All right, let's get into a little bit of the questions, because we will address a little early look at Clemson as well. And we'll lead off with that 214 Stang. And before we get into questions, I do want to shout out all of our sponsors throughout the podcast this fall. StatusJet, reach out to them, statusjet.com. Mention us, you can get a discount on a flight to Charlotte, round trip with them. They're hooking people up left and right. And then you've got Thomas Auto Group. Check them out. Go up 75 in McKinney. Ford, Subaru, Volkswagen. Mention us. Get employee pricing. You've got Roback. Pony Express 20 is the code for 20% off. It's the holidays. Get yourself some Roback gear. Mizzen and Maine as well have hooked it up for us as well. And bunch of others. AKM Turpin Greens, Alex Meredith Carpenter. Mention us again for a discount on your project. They just did another one, so looking forward to sharing that with you guys out in Saxe. So shout out to those of you who have reached out to them and had them out to even quote your project. So, all right, let's go on in here. 214 Stang asks, how does SMU match up against Clemson? And admittedly, for whatever reason, I haven't watched a ton of Clemson.
Yeah.
And whether it's been schedules or I don't know, but I've watched a ton of Miami and I've watched a ton of Louisville and I've seen a ton of Pitt, but I haven't seen much of Clemson. But what I have seen is probably 3 games of theirs. And what stands out to me from the jump is their wide receiver skill talent and the level that Cade Klubnik has played at, quite frankly, against maybe inferior competition.
Yes.
And then their defensive line. I think their defensive line is pretty salty, and they have corners that look the part. They are a much better coached and disciplined team compared to Florida State, but they kind of look like that off the bus, and they got a quarterback.
Well, and also as someone who hasn't watched a ton of Clemson throughout the year, one thing I've looked at is common opponents. Well, they, needed a last-minute 50, 48, 52-yard rushing touchdown from Cade Klubnik to beat a Pitt team that just 1 or 2 weeks before, I think a couple weeks before, SMU blew Pitt out of the water. You look at Louisville, who SMU beat on the road, probably when Louisville was playing some of their best football, still ranked, only had the 1 loss to Notre Dame at that point. They went in there and they beat Louisville. And I don't think SMU was playing their best football at that point. Well, about a month or so later, Louisville walks into Death Valley at night. I don't know if Clemson had ever lost with that, but there's some crazy stat there. And they just kind of dominate Clemson. So I think if you want to play that game, which I don't think is the way to play that game, then you would say, okay, SMU's got a real shot here. But I think they'll take Clemson seriously. I think it'll be a tight game. I don't think Clemson really gives you the ability to blow them out. Whereas I think if they have an off night on offense, I think it could, they could run away with it. But it's going to be a tough challenge on just both sides of the ball. Again, I think they're a more complete team than Miami is or ever was. I think they're one of the more complete teams in the ACC.
I think for me, and I share the initial just impressions from body types, but what I'm going to be intrigued to see about SMU is, and I think Louisville showed this, because I think Louisville has the best skill group that SMU's faced all year.
Yep.
The wide receivers, Isaac Brown's a stud, Tyler Shook, really good. I think for whatever reason, maybe it's all the transfers, maybe it's this, maybe it's that, they did not get it done. Maybe it's coaching on the defensive side. They did not get it done at a consistent level. But that is a team talent-wise that, top 10.
Yeah.
Should have really, could have been
Right.
in the ACC Championship. That's how good they are talent-wise. But I think Louisville's speed offensively and talent level there is where SMU presents it differently offensively, but where SMU could have some fun against Clemson. I think that Clemson's defense, I'm probably going to get memed if they lose, but I think they are slow. They're more of we're going to grind you. We're going to pound you, beat you up a little bit. Like their defensive line, I love their defensive line. Mm-hmm. They are big bodies. They are hard to go at. And if SMU's offensive line isn't on their points, it's going to be, I could see a 17-14 type of game, quite frankly. But what I think Clemson doesn't have enough of in a way is speed and those quick hitters that SMU can hit you with and things like that. And then defensively, sure, Cade Klubnik can throw bombs, but one thing Clemson does steadily is play complementary football offensively. And, they did not play well enough today against South Carolina at 14 points. SMU's old friend, Garrett Riley, in games where they've got to have it, they didn't have it offensively this year.
And I think, I would also say, whereas SMU has played in a bunch of close games down the stretch and has that experience, I'm not sure Clemson has. When you look at their wins early on in the season after that opening, defeat to Georgia, which was rough, they blew a bunch of teams out, and then they start, getting to the tougher part of their schedule, and they dropped one to Louisville. That was going to be their first real test since Georgia, to be honest, and they lose that one. A couple games later, and then, of course, at the end of the season now, you play a game that was always going to be tight, rivalry game against South Carolina, and they just can't come up with the goods. So I think SMU, they just know how to be successful in more situations than maybe a Clemson does.
The blueprint for SMU in this game, because Clemson fans will show out. They thought they were dead in the water.
Yep.
I'm sure there's a little damper on it, but they will show up in Charlotte. And so prayers up to everybody who didn't book early. But the fly status jet, it literally might be cheaper than
At this point,
booking a flight and then hotel multiple nights and all the things. But they just have not offensively shown up, and like the blueprint for SMU is that Louisville game.
Yep.
I mean, that's what you want if you're SMU. You want to find that magic that you took to Louisville against a raucous crowd, but not packed house. Like the upper deck was empty, which is probably what we're going to be looking at in Bank of America Stadium in Charlotte. It's going to be that type of crowd. It's going to be cold.
Yeah.
So SMU better be ready to roll in that respect and run Brashard Smith and do all of those things. But the blueprint is Louisville, forcing some key turnovers and winning the turnover battle, controlling it enough with the ground game. I think you got to hit 35 rush attempts, maybe 40, and just try to play that type of brand of football that they did against Pitt and Louisville. And that's kind of what carry you to a victory. And, you look at the name, and sure, you think Clemson is going to not necessarily have their way with SMU, but the outside media will say this Dabo Swinney, they're going to take care of business now they've made it.
Right.
It's kind of like Highland Park Magic. They just have found ways in the past to make it happen in the playoffs. But, Clemson is not the usual Clemson team. They do not have one single signature win on their.
No.
I mean, it's Pitt.
Right. And
Pitt's their best win, and SMU marked them.
And again, I'm sure some of the headlines will be Dabo's been here before, whereas SMU's this new kid on the block. They've never been in this type of game. And while that might matter a little bit, I'm not sure it's going to matter too much. And when you start looking at some of these tight games, they put up 21 against Louisville in a loss, 24 against Virginia Tech, 24 against Pitt, 14 today against South Carolina. So we talk about the stat all the time. But if SMU gets to that 30-point mark, based on the history, it looks like that would likely be enough to get the win. Again, when you look at some of these teams, they were not able to blow them out, some of the higher quality teams in the ACC.
Yeah, 100%. All right, we'll have a ton of coverage on SMU Clemson all week long. Go to ontheponyexpress.com. No promo code, but it's $1 for your first week, and for a few more hours, it's 50% off your first year. So jump on that ASAP before time runs out. All right, Biter asks, what's your thought on the high number of penalties on the offensive line this season? Is the blame split between Justice and the players? Then you throw in personal foul penalties. Our players have been drawing throughout the season. Would you consider it a lack of discipline? I've said this on the board, and I'll say it again. Show me a team that is undisciplined that is 11-1. Truly undisciplined in their craft, in what they do, and how they prepare, and how they execute enough on game day where you trailed less than 10 minutes in a Power 4 conference slate. So, yes, if SMU goes out there and even hits double-digit penalties against Clemson, even hits 7 for 100, it's going to be concerning. That is going to potentially get you beat.
Yeah.
But the reality is they are one of the more penalized teams in the country for a multitude of reasons. I mean, we like he mentioned, you can talk about, the unsportsmanlike, but Ja'Kai Clark, dude, that Cal player was messing with him and under his grill, and he kind of went like this, and the guy literally flopped. I had a great angle on it, and the official saw it, and whoop, out came the flag. So, yeah, you can't do that. It doesn't matter. Those penalties do count no matter what, but you don't get to 11-1 in back-to-back seasons with a undisciplined team.
Right.
I mean, it's just not possible.
It's not. And going back to the Virginia game last week to this week's game, there have been quite a few false starts, but I think they talked about it after the game. They're practicing their silent cadence, right? And so now when you go into an ACC championship game in Clemson's backyard, well, maybe those false starts throughout the last couple of games were worth it, because otherwise you might have a bunch of them against Clemson and be like, well, where did this come from? And it would have been because SMU isn't prepared, where now they've had a couple of weeks and hopefully they've gotten some of those mistakes out of the way.
Yeah, That's the big thing on the offensive line. I do think, you have a scrambling quarterback. If he goes one way and the offensive lineman has his back to him, doesn't know that, the defense player goes, sometimes your technique can then lead to a little jersey grab. So there's that as well. So yes, the number, the yardage, concerning. Really can't do it against Clemson, but I'll tell you this much. If SMU plays as efficiently as they did offensively and defensively and wins the turnover battle and they rack up another 15 penalties for 125 yards, they're probably going to win the game.
They still
like a 30 piece on Clemson with SMU's defense is actually going to look pretty good.
Yep.
And football is a long game. And I say this on the board a lot when, you get the lull in the second quarter and people are losing their minds. And look, SMU did not play well in that lull offensively. But they don't stop the game after 30 minutes. They keep playing. And we talked about the consistency earlier of this team. They have found ways to, over the course of 60 minutes, put together the best version of the two teams on the field throughout the entirety of ACC play. So there's something to be said for that. But here's some good questions from our friend Bumgarner. What would you rate this game on a scale of 1 to 10?
I would give it
0 to 10.
I would give it about an 8, honestly. Again, I don't think it's a 10. Of course not. But I just think, considering the circumstances of what's going on around the country, the committee probably didn't watch the game. So they'll just look at the score and say, okay, SMU took care of business. And that's all you can ask for.
Against a bowl team, too.
Yep.
And I'll say 7. Only reason why is I felt like Isaac Pearson had a bad game. If SMU's going to have to punt against Clemson, that has to get cleaned up. But the kicking operation was fine otherwise. You were missing Logan Parr, who has a groin. He was a game time decision. It was kind of, just one of those things where when you get to this position, SMU felt like they can play Ben Sparks and be fine, and they were. And so we expect Logan Parr back. That was really the only injury out of this one that I saw, unless you saw another. But Kevin Jennings, 0 turnovers, SMU 0 turnovers. They had 5 sacks. The defense dominated. They forced a quarterback change, which is always good. And SMU had Preston Stone in there with 8 minutes left in the fourth. So, they didn't call the dogs off. They kept going, which was an awesome moment for Preston. We didn't talk enough about that, but you have a program that has really been, I think just at a point where they're taking care of business so well that I don't want to say they get bored, but you get comfortable.
Yeah.
And maybe in this game they just were able to control it so well that they didn't. But what would you give Rhett Lashley for this game?
Man, well, I don't remember any unnecessary timeouts, so I think that was a plus. I think it was Cal that was calling the timeouts, in certain situations where maybe they didn't need to. So that was a plus. I think, play calling was pretty good. I think even during the lull, I still think Rhett committed to the run. I don't remember a series distinctly where they just took 3 deep shots. They didn't take a lot of deep shots throughout the entirety of the game. And so they stuck to the game plan. And yes, in moments, maybe Cal's going to rise to the occasion. But to your point, that's why they play 60 minutes. I just don't think, and I don't think SMU thought Cal was going to be able to hang with SMU for the full 60 minutes. And that's when you saw SMU pull away.
Yep. And then lastly, 0-10, what would you give the offense?
Well, a couple of things. One, I think Preston Stone showed he'll be ready for any moment he needs, down the line if SMU were to ever need him. Again, a 7 maybe. If I gave the team an 8, I don't think I can give the offense an 8 when the defense was the better of the two sides. So maybe a 6 or a 7. They never kicked it into full gear maybe at the beginning of the game. But did enough to win comfortably.
Yeah, 415 yards, calling out the dogs at some point late there definitely, impacts that in a way, even though Preston had a big play, awesome moment for him. In what Rhett Lashley did say is going to be his final game in Ford. So, we'll definitely miss him. It was kind of just emotional watching him walk off because Preston and I talked about it before the season, and he said, "What has this been 8-9 years?" And I was like, "Oh man, like it's been a long time." And but very, very special moment for Preston, and he's a guy, like Rhett said, Mustang for life. He's an SMU kid, legacy young man. and just really a cool moment. It's something you kind of like can't write. I mean, the only way to write it better is if he's the guy in Kevin's position, but
Right.
to get that moment at the end is probably a really cool close to the chapter for him. And there's a question in the YouTube chat asking about if he's going to for sure portal. I think that is answered, and he's going to look somewhere to play next year. When that happens, I don't know. For playoff teams, you do get an extra portal window, so there is that piece. And any program would be lucky to have him in whatever capacity he wants to go do. If he wants to go play at the highest level, there's schools that are going to be wanting quarterback competition depth, a guy that could start. And if he wants to go absolutely, go berserk, nutso, and group of five, I mean, and go to some other school, I mean, he could do that too. So wishing the best for him. All right. What would be a good number for SMU to show out in Charlotte, and how many do we think we're going to see? I don't even know how to predict this.
I was going to say, I'm not sure how to quantify it.
SMU's allotment is 5,500. I think taking care of that would be nice. I do think a bunch of people. I think it'd be pretty cool if 15,000 people showed up. I think it's a tough ask, but a lot of people are booking flights from what I'm already in like 4 different group chats. One of our friends of the show has him and 25 fraternity brothers going. So shout out, you know who you are. But I mean, this is can't miss. So I know that's a lot of numbers to have to get to like 15, but I think 15 would be a great show.
And I think, as a student and for students of SMU, you don't know if this opportunity is going to happen again, right? I mean, SMU's come in and dominated in year one, but you certainly can't take it for granted. So I think students are really, I know people that are driving, and it's like a 15-hour drive. And so they're really committed to going. I also think the way SMU is played, I'm not sure how many. I don't think it'll be that many, but there are enough people that like SMU's story that might just want to go to the game if they're close already there and say, yeah, I'll cheer for SMU. They're a fun story.
Yeah, it's going to be cold there. Everybody bundle up. Go, get your rowback hoodies and all those things. Overnight them, all the things. All right. SMU alum 11 asked, what happened to the offense between drives 5 through 9 were scoreless and a lot of 3-and-outs? Really turned back when McGill's interception happened in the fourth quarter. I'm not sure. Was that late in the game? But because I feel like SMU, maybe they did early in the fourth quarter. But anyway, SMU went in the second quarter with 9 minutes or so left. They went 3-and-out. Turnover on downs at the end of the half. They were close. They were close there.
Was that the one where Mucci? Yeah,
that was close to getting points there. But then they came out of halftime and went 3-and-out with -13. And then they went 6 plays for 20 yards and didn't get anything there. I think that might have been the Ja'Kai Clark
where they got stepped back.
Personal foul. I could be wrong on that though. But that would make sense because they got to the 40 and then he had the personal foul and they got back up to their 45 and ended up punting. And then they went field goal and then touchdown. So what I saw was an offense that, I think Rhett kind of started to let it rip a little bit. Mm-hmm. And Brashard Smith was not in the game. And I do think they were trying to be careful there. But I just think they're up 21-0. And I think they felt like they could kind of do whatever they wanted.
And I think that's kind of a testament to this whole season. It's been pretty impressive to see SMU hold key guys in certain parts of the season because they're so confident they can still win. I mean, I think I remember, Tank Booker was questionable against Louisville, and you're like, that's a game they're going to need Tank Booker. Yeah. And they didn't. And so it's just that there have been certain guys they've been able to rest, and, that's why they're in a pretty good spot, all things considered, at the end of the season, record-wise and, health-wise.
All right. So I think we I think that was about it. Brashard is playing through something. He's been playing through something pretty much the entire ACC slate. So it's not going to get better. What you're seeing from Brashard is what you're going to get next week, I think. And the big key will be, getting a Logan Parr back, being able to maybe get a healthier Savion Byrd. Mm-hmm. Andrew Chambly played a lot today. Matthew Hibner's doing his thing. I mean, this team has weapons, man. And Jordan Hudson didn't practice that much this week, coming back from protocol. But all in all, SMU can't. I don't remember a single injury for SMU off the top of my head. So,
and I think you just real quick, you talked about on one of the podcasts earlier this week, that will be the biggest benefit of winning the ACC championship. It's not just having a bye week; it is having a month. And maybe Brashard Smith injury can't get better, but there are a bunch of guys that Coach Lashley's not telling us, and maybe we don't know, that are dealing with stuff that in a month's time can get a lot better.
100%. H-Town Pony, how much of the defensive dominance the last 2 weeks is the opponents, and how much is how well the D is locked in? So I think this is a really good question.
Yep.
I think what you've seen from Cal this year and Virginia, I mean, Virginia's been able to hang around teams in part because of their defense. And then you have Cal, which has been able to find ways to win key games, but also to lose them.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, Virginia went and beat Pitt. They hung around with Clemson. They put up 31 points on Clemson. And then they just aren't a really good team overall. So that is that piece when it comes to Virginia. But Virginia hung around with Notre Dame. But, again, their offense just isn't very good. I mean, that's the reality of it. They have Malachi Fields, the wide receiver, who made that incredible catch.
Yeah.
Calandria can do Calandria things and then do Calandria things and throw interceptions or do this or do that. So I think for me, the D is super locked in.
Right.
I mean, that's the reality of how well this team plays to their standard. But you also have to know they did it against opponents that, I mean, are sitting. Virginia just missed out on a bowl, and then Cal made a bowl and finished 6-6. But I mean, Clemson's offense hasn't really done much against teams with a pulse defensively.
No.
24 points against Pitt.
And I mean, you can say what you want about how bad the offenses are. The SMU defense has done as much as they can, regardless of how bad the offense is, right? I mean, again, I think you just said Virginia scored 31 points against Clemson. Yeah. I mean, that's not nothing. And so maybe the offenses are bad, but SMU is also making them look pretty bad.
Yeah. And I think the couple of questions that we've had roll in as well in this thread are also around, we talked about the offensive lull. We talked about attendance. All right, SMU grad. What percentage of SMU's ACC record, 17 penalties for 137 yards, were legit? It looked like 33%. That might be a little low,
right?
But because they had a lot of procedural stuff. But I mean, there were some penalties that, I mean, there was the pass interference on that slant where CJ Sanders, I think, got called for it, and I was like, yeah, it was tough. And extended the drive, and I think that allowed them to kind of move the ball a little bit and get a field goal. I could be wrong, but
could be. And on the other side, if they're going to be, the refs are going to be that soft, if you will, and throw the flags for a lot of those. There were some that they didn't get the other way. I mean, you look at one where Deuce Harmon probably would have had the easiest interception of his life if he wasn't being tackled before trying to make the catch, and there was no flag there. So there were, I think part of it, maybe the refs were just lenient to throw flags, but then again, it was just for SMU. So,
yeah. For those on, attendance watch, this is going to be an interesting one because there is announced and then there's the reality of what's actually there. I think that said 62,000 last year for Florida State Louisville, and I was watching that game. I don't know, it didn't feel like that, but I didn't get a stadium shot. But Clemson and North Carolina had 64,000 the year before that in 2022. Those are two teams that are right there.
I mean, right.
So,
right.
I mean, this is well attended, at least listed every year. So we'll see what is brought out. And then which senior will you be most sad to see move on and not watch after this season? I assume that's the same question.
Right.
Not like which one do you not want to watch ever again?
It'd be easy to say Preston Stone. I know he's not a senior, but he's someone that I've been watching SMU for a long time, but really, really dove into it when he came on the scene maybe the year before with Tanner and stuff. But he's been really fun to watch. I think the last couple of years, just seeing Jonathan McGill, he's just such a mature guy. Leads that, linebacker. There's too many.
Yeah, there's so many. This is a really hard one. It's like picking out. It's like Bill having to pick out his favorite wine.
Yeah.
I'm I'm going to say, I mean, you could blanket statement. I know a lot of the guys on this list and know them well. I will say watching Elijah Roberts' journey on defense and getting to spend as much time as I have with him kind of away from football has been awesome. And his parents are great. And they're probably listening right now. Maybe not right now. They're probably out. But they'll listen. And then Roger Daniels, I think is one of the coolest stories. I mean, next year 100%. Isaiah Wachovia is going to be on senior day and things like that, and that one will be right up there with me for Rod, and just what he's gone through. Losing his dad a couple years ago now, and returning to SMU and turning into one of the biggest names for this team, and what he's been able to do. I mean, there's so many guys like that. I mean, Kobe Wilson's been a blast to get to know and do so much media with. Justin Osborne was in 2020. Brandon Crosley, we ranked him a 4-star back when I was at 24/7. And shout out, his crew that's always supporting. And B Cross is one of those that's tough. Preston, I mean, like he said to me before this year, 8 or 9 years he's been at this. And Jonathan McGill, got pictures of him when he was a commit. And Ford was empty then. So it's a tough group. This is definitely not one that I want to pick. I'm very happy that it's going to be a much smaller group next year. Right. So I don't miss anyone. Ahmad Walker met his parents in Stanford. I mean, it just list goes on. When you get around these guys a lot, you know their stories and what they go through. And Tank Booker is great too. He was at our NIL event that we did to kick off the Meet the Transfers. So just awesome guys that were honored today. So, all right, One Trick Pony. How close are you taking my advice, creating your own worldwide college sports web business? 0. I'm not battling my guy Shannon Terry on that. He is the man. He's done it now 3 times, and he knows how to build winners. Pony from Tampa. It seemed like the offense stalled for a majority of the game after the first 21. How can that be fixed? Yeah, I think they really need to stick with the run game. I think that's with the genesis of it, and not commit stupid penalties as well. But that is the biggest thing.
Yeah, I can't disagree. Yeah, not much else to add there.
That's great, Rob. Thanks for the time in Charlottesville, by the way. Great time. How about Preston? That was awesome.
That was totally awesome. And it was awesome to see Rhett, open up the playbook a little bit, not just let Preston hand the ball off for the remainder of the game. He was slinging it. And, I mean, he proved he's still got it. I had people text me, he's still sharp, no rust coming off the bench. Just perfect performance from him.
Beacon's Pony, was McFall surprised, or has he been practicing like a badass this whole time? Not a surprise. He's that dude. Get used to seeing him in the end zone. What does Clemson takeaway learn from this game?
Wait, what is that one?
What does Clemson take away?
What is
or
Clemson
learn
take
from
away?
this game?
Okay, that's an interesting one. I think they learned what other teams have failed to do, which is I think you have to commit to either the run or the pass. SMU balances it so well that if you're going to try and stop both, SMU is just going to expose you on both sides. And so if you're Clemson, if there's a way to limit the run game and force Kevin Jennings to beat you for 4 quarters, which he's been able to do, but I just think it's so difficult to stop this SMU offense because they can beat you in so many different ways. And on the flip side, if you're the Clemson offense, I think you have to rely on your strength versus maybe SMU's weakness, which is the secondary. And I think you've really just got to, commit to it and hope that works out.
All right. And then what was your most impactful play of the game?
Most impactful play of the game. Let's see here. Let me just go back a little
bit. I'm going to go Hibner's touchdown.
Okay.
I think that was enough to start things off, and it seemed like SMU loosened up from there.
I think I might just go with Derek McFall. I think with his touchdown, because he got in there easily from 8 yards out. And, it's an exciting future for him, but I truly believe they are going to have chances for him to be dynamic and game-changing in the ACC Championship and beyond, because, like you said, they held out for Shard Smith for certain points. And so if they can still keep someone in there who's raw but has the potential to be explosive, why not give him a go in the ACC Championship?
Was it me or did Cal get more pressure than expected? What caused it? I think you go back to not running the football enough.
Yeah.
And I think the offensive line, maybe didn't have its best stuff in pass protection, but that's kind of been their weakness all year.
Maybe not, but I think they finish with just one sack, or maybe there's more because no, just one sack. I mean, there were times on design runs where Kevin lost some yards, but that was also preserving his body and not taking hits where he'd run out of bounds. But I mean, again, one sack on the day. Maybe there was some pressure and forced Kevin into some incompletions, but if Cal's success is forcing Kevin out of the pocket, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing because Kevin can still make plays. So it's not the be-all, end-all.
All right, SMU grad, guess for an early line for SMU Clemson. I'll do you one better. I'll tell you the line. SMU opens as a 1.5-point favorite over Clemson. If you had that before the season in the ACC Championship, I want the lottery tickets, and I want them because that's how we start our worldwide web. That's how we start right there, Dean.
So that is unbelievable to think that SMU is favored in the ACC Championship game. I mean, I know people were asking the players in the post game, has it sunk in? I think it's fair to ask us if it's even sunk in yet because that is pretty remarkable.
All right, Comet 7777. What's your confidence level at SMU making the college football playoffs? Should we lose Clemson?
I mean, I'm still pretty confident. I have to say, I just think there's been so much go wrong in the SEC that it is going to be super hard for some of those committee chairs to give enough real and valid reasons to kick SMU out. Again, I think, Miami losing today is not a good thing for the ACC, but I don't see a world where Miami gets in now because SMU's second loss would come in the ACC Championship. So I think Miami's eliminated, and if they're not, it means SMU is in regardless. So, I mean, I'm still pretty confident.
Yeah, same here. I don't have anything to add. I think we broke that down really well. And I think some of the right things that had to happen for SMU happened today as well.
Totally.
Kurt, where we ranked on Tuesday. So Ohio State was 2. Don't see SMU falling below them or SMU jumping them.
Right. Not enough.
Not enough. I think they'll be like 5, 7, something like that.
Yep.
And then the rest of the top 10 won minus Miami.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
I think. Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah.
Notre Dame's comparison is Tennessee. Indiana's way ahead. Boise State. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think SMU's sitting at 8, 7, maybe. Like, I think SMU's win today could maybe help them jump like a Tennessee, maybe.
Right. Or
Tennessee.
I mean, again, this is where the brand bias comes into play, but maybe a Georgia, right? They were at home against an ACC team that went to 8 overtimes. Now, I don't think it's going to happen. I think the gap there was too big, but I think they closed the gap this week.
All right, Pony Excess. Now the regular season's in the books. Can you please say SMU's a blue blood got it? I'm not doing anything different.
I think
we've worn the same clothes for like months now.
Yeah. My
dad
dad went to the BYU game. I told him he couldn't come to this one this week. You just got to keep. That was the only game he went to. So SMU keeps winning.
All right, Bruno A. This is the last one. This might be a fan-only perspective, but what is the mindset heading into the conference championship? I love this team and school, obviously, but how does a 20-year-old alum reconcile this incredible season and not be disappointed? Help me, Billy. Happy, scared, excited, anxious, arrogant, all at once. Well, there's one thing I know about the young SMU alums that are out there now, which, by the way, 20-year alum. Okay, all right. I was going to say the young alums right now are flying off the handle on Twitter, but maybe you are as well, Bruno 08. But no, I think you just have to enjoy this moment, and it's hard. Like, that's why I try to share. Maybe don't get too nuts on the board when you have a lull in the offense, in the offense in the second quarter or this or that. I know you want everything to be perfect, but I can tell you one thing about this game against Clemson: it probably won't be perfect.
No, it can't be.
So you got to enjoy the moment. You have to enjoy freezing your tail off if you get to go, and watching SMU do something that has never, ever been done in the history of Group of 5 Power 4 moves. It's never happened. I mean, I don't think Rhett said something like, "No one's gone better than 1-1." To start there. So you right off the bat, you've either lost one and won one or whatever. So SMU was making history from the get-go, but this is something that is so cool, so special. I say so rare. I thought it was pretty cool last year covering it, but this is a whole nother level. And I, if you if you are a loose fan of a college football playoff team that has gone in the past and you've gone to those big games, I think you have a little bit of a taste. But if you're an alum or you're in school now and SMU is now in the ACC Championship, and if they punch their ticket to the Peach Bowl, and that's probably where they're going, Peach Bowl officials were there today, it is one of the coolest things to go to those big-time games and be a fan of the team. It's the buzz around the stadium, the buzz around that city. I mean, they take over the city for like a week. Like, you know, Peach Bowl in Atlanta, it's on New Year's Day. So I know if SMU wins the ACC Championship, I don't know what you're doing, but I'm going to be in Atlanta New Year's Eve. And probably for a few days before that, because there's so much that goes on, and just enjoy every moment of it. And it starts with enjoying the ACC Championship. And if you keep that perspective, however this team plays, which is they're going to play hard, they're going to give it absolutely everything they've got, no doubt. You're going to at least look back and either say, wow, holy crap, we did it, or you're going to say, wow, this was such a fun ride. Now I just hope that we make the college football playoff.
Right. And I think, you know, coming into the season, of course, no one saw this coming, and going out of it, you're not necessarily going to know the next time this will happen. And so just because it's the first year in the ACC, it doesn't mean SMU is going to do this every year in the ACC. And so it is hard to kind of capture the moment and what it means. But I think you've just got to take it in. Let the team express, right? They're not allowed to take in these moments for as long as the fans are. So just take it in.
Yeah. All right, guys. That is it. We are going to get out of here. This has been basically an hour edition. So we will catch you guys from Charlotte next time. You and I will be doing a pod. So we'll be recapping what will be a historic day, a historic week, all the things for SMU. So follow us at ontheponyexpress.com. Subscribe for just $1 for your first week. Had a bunch of people subscribe. Have a lot of recruit reactions up. It was a who's who down there. Ty Hawkins is back, Kamad Odom. So a lot of things to come. And oh, by the way, SMU basketball had the #1 player in America on campus today. So go check that out there right now, as well as Andy Enfield and company are getting in on the fun too. So hope you guys enjoyed this edition of the On the Pony Express podcast, the After Stangs Show. For Dean Ralsky, I'm Billy Embody. We'll catch you guys next time. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to the On the Pony Express podcast with Billy Embody. Follow us on your socials on X at SMU_on3 and on Instagram at On3SMU. And keep it locked to ontheponyexpress.com for more coverage.